Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Vegan Marketing Podcast. So I'm so excited today because I couldn't have wished for a more inspirational guest. I'm speaking to Laura Chepner, who's campaigning to introduce mandatory plant-based options to the guidance regarding school meals. And she'll be speaking at the All Parliamentary Group on the 21st of January to represent this next week. So Laura will be speaking to influential people such as a Parliamentary Under Secretary of State and representatives from the Department for Education. That's not her only accolade though, so we'll be finding out about her journey to this point, and Laura will be sharing some tips on what she's learned so far that might also help you in your vegan business. So without further ado, welcome Laura. How are you today?
I am fantastic. All the better for speaking to you. Thank you very much for having me, and I'm very honoured to be your first guest.
Well, thank you for being my first guest. I'm very excited to speak to you too. Can you tell us a little bit more about what will be happening next week?
Yes, so this has been an ongoing struggle or battle that I've been dealing with for many years, and it goes back to when my own daughter first started school. On her first day, even though the school knew that she was vegan, they still refused to feed her. And I remember 4 years ago now, just crying, absolutely heartbroken, going around the local supermarket, trying to quickly get together a school meal to provide for her in a packed lunch form. And off the back of that, I thought there must be other vegan parents out there who are being denied food as well. So I started to put myself out there and offer my services to other parents and offer guidance because off the back of my daughter being refused food, I actually made a huge noise and got in touch with my local MP and councillors and school food services. Luckily, I actually was part of Bury, the borough where I live, implementing the first vegan menu that's now rolling, and any vegan or plant-based child can choose, which is unbelievable. But I've realised over the years that there are so many hundreds of thousands of parents out there who are just being denied, and they take that as gospel. So I've been looking through guidance, obviously, and what Parliament and the law says, and there's only one document out there, EA guidance, that was written in 2019 that basically says if you want vegan food in a school, you should ask for it, and hopefully your school will give it to you, and that's it. So there's no real push for the head teacher to comply, or there's no real law or guidance for school food services to ensure that they have that option. And I've just heard from too many parents who are all in the same boat and who are afraid to ask because they don't want to rock the boat if their child has just joined the school and become that awkward parent. And so after helping individuals and working with individual councils, I thought, you know what, we need to get to the root cause of this, and have managed to find myself invited to the APPG on school food next week.
So that is really amazing. So how can people support you in this?
Anybody from the public is able to come and watch the APPG, which will be streamed online.
Okay.
So I'm sure we'll be able to share that with your listeners in some form of link. I also have a petition on change.org for all plant-based options, it's called, which currently has about 7,500 signatures. And although apparently Jacob Rees-Mogg doesn't care about change.org, it's there, and I just feel as though if I had lots of parent power behind me, or even necessarily, you know, just vegans who support without having children, it'd be great if they could add their signature, especially to get to the 10,000 mark I'm looking for. That would be fantastic, just so that I know as I go and walk into this parliamentary meeting that it's not just little old me, and that I have more names backing me. So that would be really helpful as well. So both links will be shared, I'm sure.
Yeah,
and it'd
definitely
be great to get as much interest and help before next week as possible.
Yeah, no, that's something that I'm definitely sure that our lovely vegan community support you with. That sounds amazing, and it sounds so important for not only children now, but children in the future, but for all children, not just vegan children. I think it's really important that all children eat this healthy, whole food, plant-based diet. How did you manage to achieve this? How did you manage to get invited to go and speak in Parliament?
Absolutely. So when my daughter started at school and it became apparent that school food wasn't being provided, this was actually something that I'd already half known because I trained as a primary school teacher myself. And the school where I'd worked predominantly and was promoted to the coordinator for special needs, when I became vegan, I actually left that job because I realized that the curriculum was clashing with my ethics too much. When I became vegan, and I'm sure it's the same for a lot of your listeners, something comes over you where you just want to change the world and fix everything and go out there and be as loud and proud as you possibly can. And so, drawing on what I had learned being a teacher and having to teach things that clash with my ethics, things about zoos and aquariums, and you get your protein from meat and whatnot. And then that added a few years later with seeing how my daughter was refused food, I actually thought to myself that there must be some way that I can use my skills of having been a teacher and a Senko and a parent and create something that was tangible almost. And so I began a consultancy service called Primary Veducation, and I actually started going into schools and speaking to staff rooms up and down the country on the request of vegan parents who were struggling and really needed an intermediary between themselves and the head teacher. And I explained what veganism was in an hour-long presentation. I talked them through the reasons why that child or family may have become vegan and ways that they can tweak their practice to become more vegan inclusive, and just found myself, as well as in the background, supporting parents with template letters and performers to fill in and send off to head teachers or school food services, that I was actually going into schools as well. And so Primary Veducation just really grew and grew and grew. It's always been a voluntary service until one day when I thought, there's only one of me and there are so many schools, perhaps I should write a guidebook. And so I have a bit of a plug. It's right here.
Oh, fantastic. Plug away.
It's called the Educator's Guide for Vegan Inclusive Teaching. And I just thought, if I want teachers to take me seriously and they want to really change and better themselves and become vegan inclusive, then they'll need some form of guidance. And so that's where the guidebook came from. And I suppose making this noise with local councils and writing to MPs, and word just kind of spread about my existence and my missions. And Kerry McCarthy, a wonderful MP who is vegan herself, and I had some conversations about how I could potentially move forward. And so I guess having had so much experience going into schools, growing my skill set, having the guidebook, and also, the cheeky nature that I have to just kind of get in the faces of the people who make the decisions, meant that Sharon Hodgins, the MP, who is the chair for the APPG on school food, felt that I'd make an interesting guest, and I'm very grateful to her for feeling that way, because I really cannot wait to get this on the agenda.
Yeah, fantastic. And that's just a really interesting journey. And you must have developed a lot of skills along the way. And what I wanted to ask you was, when you started going into schools, did you meet with a lot of resistance? How were you received at schools when you were going in to educate the teachers about what it is to be vegan? What was the kind of feedback and response that you got?
So more often than not, as I said, I went in because parents had pushed and pushed for it. I was met with resistance that wasn't necessarily hostile, but more, what is this person going to talk to us about, and why is she here? We're teachers, we're not interested in veganism. It was more of this is going to be just such a nuisance. But I think the way that I deliver my presentation in a really informative, an informal way, almost just a friendly conversation, it meant that by the end they would always understand why I was there. So it was a real learning journey for most of the teachers who I spoke to. And sometimes it would get hairy. I remember driving into this tiny little village down in Norwich, lambing farms to the left of me and cow farms to the right of me, and I was thinking, where has this mother brought me to this tiny little community village where the school also, it was also the church as well, and just really rural Great Britain. And I went in, and this one woman, she just wouldn't look me in the face. She just would not look me in the face. And then a little bit later on, once she'd started to understand the world through the vegan child's eyes, she softened. But in the Q&A at the end, she said to me, "Do you think that my daughter is evil because she eats meat?"
Oh my.
And yeah, just really trying to figure out why I was there. But I think my many years of talking on this subject and my diplomacy that has come with being a teacher and being in the senior leadership team just meant that I was able to just talk to her about black and white and grey areas. When I talk to my daughter, I'm very black and white. And so she gets it. Perhaps you're slightly more in the grey area. And, towards the end, she warms up, and everybody does. And I always put feedback forms on the tables for them to fill out. And each and every single one of them has said, "I've learned a lot, and now I really understand that I should be more vegan inclusive." And I think it's because there is no counter argument to veganism.
No.
And if you want to be an inclusive teacher, then you'll have to go those lengths. And they're not necessarily even lengths. It's more often than not just little tweaks to practice, little changes in language. And so it's not overwhelming. And so, but even though there has been resistance, I mean, the biggest resistance, going back to your question, is more often than not the initial phase when I try and make contact with the teacher or the head teacher. "Hi, I'm Laura, let me in." Because they may very well ignore that. But parents hold a lot more power, and I say this a lot more power in schools than they know. And if they are persistent, then the head teacher will eventually have to let me in.
Yes, actually, that made me think about something I saw on your Instagram. So you said that teachers and politicians are public servants, and they are here to help us. So we should feel free to approach them. And actually, I'd not thought of it like that before.
Yeah, the phrase that MPs use is "they work for you." They work for you. And in our society, we look at MPs and we look at teachers as figures of authority, because they do have to work hard to get where they are, and they are held accountable a lot of the time, and they should be respected. But in actual fact, if we always keep that in mind, that they work for you, we pay an MP's wages, we pay a teacher's wages, it all comes from the government. And we're just trying to make a better society and make things easier for vegan children who are compassionate, who should be thanked for their compassion. And so I always encourage and empower parents as often as possible to say, your head teacher may have said no for vegan food, or no, they're still going to teach the zoo topic. But in actual fact, if we work together to make them see why and understand why, it doesn't come from a place of malice. It just comes from a place of misunderstanding or genuine, just not knowing. And then we can work together to teach them and let them know. And then hopefully they'll be more inclined to let me in.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And it's kind of thinking about something in a different way than I was used to. So that's really resonated with me. That sounds amazing. It sounds like you've had a really amazing and interesting journey, and you've kind of inspired a lot of people along the way, and you are continuing to do so. Are there any tips and hints or anything that you've done that you feel has helped you to keep going? Because it seems to me that you've had to be very resilient to go along this path and to persuade and get people to trust you and like you. And are there any steps or techniques that you share that might be useful to other people?
I guess so. I mean, my driving force is veganism. I was vegetarian for the animals aged 11. And then when I became vegan, whilst weaning my daughter from breast milk to solids, it just took over me. And I just think if you don't lose sight of why you do what you do, then that will be just the most incredible driving force. I mean, until I had my guidebook and a few other resources that I've created, everything I did was voluntary, free, petrol, hotels, all of it. Because of the fact that I just wanted to do that and just get the message out there. But I think also listening to people who are inspirational, being around people who are inspirational. I cannot begin to tell you the amount of times I have watched Melanie Joy speak, or Gary Yourofsky speak, or Michael Clapper speak, all of these influential vegan people who are just talking on the subject over and over again. I mean, I've just bought a book on ethical veganism. I am an ethical vegan. I know what they are, but I've still bought a book on it because I just never, ever want to stop learning. Yeah. And I think the more that you can learn, the more phrases that you can constantly say over and over again, the more impactful they become and the more confident you can become. There's nothing worse than standing in front of a room of people trying to convince them that veganism is normal when they feel it's completely the opposite, and umming and ahhing and not really being confident about your what you're saying. And I guess that can come with any business owner who has a product to sell. If you know everything there is to know and you keep learning and mix with people who are going to inspire you and promote you and lift you, and likewise you for them, then you're more likely to be able to get it out there to the masses and be more successful.
Yeah, that is really excellent advice. Yeah, thank you for those tips. I'm going to be looking those people up that I don't already follow. So thank you very much for that. It's been a really such a privilege to talk to you today, and thank you for sharing all your knowledge and expertise. And what I'll be doing is I'll be putting the links to the petition and to all the information that we've talked about today below. So it'd be wonderful if listeners can share and sign the petition and just support Laura in her mission. Thank you very much for your time, Laura. And I really appreciate you speaking to me today.
It's been an absolute pleasure. You're a dream to speak to, and I wish you the very best of luck with each episode that comes to follow.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Laura.